Chapter 16 The Wood of Radnor. Along the crest of the Riddings, the Morthbrood watched Shapeshifter climb laboriously up from the farm. Grimnir sat a little apart from the brood, while over the top of the hill, in an old quarry, were mustered the Svart Alfar. "They are all there," said the Morrigan, "and they will not be drawn, though we think the threat of the Mara will bring them out once the night is gone. On the move we shall have them, but we must raise the Fimbulwinter at daybreak." "Is Slinkveil here?" "Good. The Svalt Alfar will remain in the quarry until dawn. You will not be needed, but then again you may. The Watchers have been chosen and know their duties. Grimnir will accompany us to resume our work." Jorathor and Fenodri kept watch by turns throughout the night, and at 6 o'clock they woke the others. By 7 all were ready to go. Day was near, and there was a hard frost. Colin, Susan and Gowther were taking with them a change of clothing, food for the whole party, and ground sheets. Fenodri had made himself a cloak out of an old blanket. They were about to shoulder their packs when there came a gentle knock at the door. "Aye, who is it?" said Gowther. "It's me, Maister Mossock. Is out up?" "Oh, wait a minute, Sam. I'll be reet with thee." Gowther waited until the dwarfs had hidden in the next room before he drew the bolts and unlocked the door. "There, come in, lad. I was hoping you'd be here before I went." "I saw the curtains were pulled too," said Sam Harlbutt, "and the shippons were fast, so I thought as happened summat was wrong." "Oh no, there is nothing wrong, but I've been called away, sudden like, and young Colin and Susan are coming with me. We should be back by Saturday. Can you manage by yourself? I'll get John Carter to give thee a hond if you like." "Oh no, Maister Mossock, I'll be all right." He showed not the least surprise. "But I'd best get on with the milking pretty sharpish, hadn't I? Dick Thornycroft'll be here with his wagon in half an hour." "Oh, aye. Yeah, you'd best do that now." Gowther felt Sam's unspoken criticism, but could think of no explanation to give him. It was their practice to share the milking, Gowther taking the morning and Sam the evening. The cows ought to have been milked an hour ago, but Fenodri would not let Gowther put his foot over the doorstep while it was still dark. Sam, if Dick comes before you've finished, ask him to call when he's been to Barber's." "Right-ho, Mr. Mossock." "And Sam." "Aye." "When you've done milking, I'd like you to take Bess in the cart to her sister's at Big Tidnock. She'll be stopping there while we come back. The dog will be going too." "Oh, right-ho, Maister Mossock." Sam Harlbutt was as imperturbable as only a Cheshire man could be. They waited until Sam was well into the milking before they slipped quietly out into the lane. "Which way?" said Gowther. "Let us first follow the road to the back of this hill," said Jorathor. "From there we may see much to interest us." The lane ran past the mouth of the quarry behind the Riddings, and Gowther was rather perplexed when Jorathor suggested beginning their journey with a scramble about inside. "It's nobbut an old sand-hole. We shanna get far running round here." "We shall not be long," said the dwarf. As I thought. Svarts were here in the night, but I do not think there was much else with them. Come with me now to the hilltop." He ran backwards and forwards along the Riddings like a hound beating for a scent. "Nor was there aught worse than the Morthbrood here. That is good. But yonder is what I do not like. Cousin Fenodri, what make you of those clouds to the north? How is it they have not changed since I saw them under the moon? The wind should have carried them to us long ago." Said the dwarf. "Fimbulwinter?" "Aye. They do not mean to lose. First they drive us out with the threat of the Mara. We dare not bide. Next they watch us through the day, and when we reach some lonely place, they pen us close under the Fimbulwinter till night comes, and they can take us as they wish." "Wait on," said Gowther. "What's all this Fimbulwinter business? And you've not told us yet."
"I know," broke in Fenodri, "but there are some things better left untold. It will be time enough to fear the Mara when we see them, and I hope we shall not do that. Meanwhile you will rest happier for your ignorance."
"That makes me a lot easier, I must say." Fenodri smiled and inclined his head politely. You're a supercilious little fellow when you want to be, ain't you? Said Garner testily. He was a direct, open man who liked everything to be clearly defined. He could not tolerate haziness or uncertainty, and he had not quite overcome the countryman's natural distrust of strangers. Such strangers, too. I do not mean to give offence, said the dwarf, but I must ask you to lean on our judgment in this venture. You are in our world now, and without us you will not regain your own, even though it lies at your feet. Garner looked down at Highmost Redmanhay, then back at the dwarf. There was a long pause. I spoke out of turn. You're right, and I'm wrong. I'm sorry. It is of no matter, said Fenodri. Oh, look, said Colin, anxious to change the subject. We're not the only people out early this morning. There are 2 hikers down by Mr. Carter's. Can you see them? In the lane below, a man and a woman, both rucksacked and wearing anoraks, ski trousers and heavy boots, were leaning over a field gate, apparently absorbed in a map. There are 2 more behind us on Clinton Hill, said Susan. Sure enough, a quarter of a mile away, not much higher than where they were standing, 2 hikers gazed at the wide plain and its rim of hills. Happen it's a rally, said Garner. Ha! It is indeed, laughed Jorathor shortly. Those are witches and warlocks, or I am not my father's son. What? Said Colin. Are they the Morth brood? There is the danger, said Fenodri. They mingle with others unnoticed, and can be detected only by certain marks, and that not always. For this reason we must shun all contact with men. The lonely places are dangerous, but to be surrounded by a crowd would be a greater risk. Garner shook his head and pointed his ash stick at the hikers. You mean to tell me it's the likes of them as we've got to run from? I was thinking more of broomsticks and tall hats. The whale-backed Pennines in their southern reaches crumble into separate hills which join up with the Staffordshire moors, and from the Cheshire plain 2 hills stand out above all the rest. One is Bosley Cloud, its north face sheer, and southwards a graceful sweep to the feet of the Old Man of Mow, but, for all that, a brooding, sinister mountain, for ever-changing shape when seen from meandering Cheshire lanes. The other is Shuttingslow. It is a cone in outline, but with the top of the cone sliced off, leaving a flat, narrow, exposed ridge for a summit. And 3 days hence, on that ridge, 8 miles from where they now were, Firefrost would be given into safe hands, if the Morth brood could be kept at bay for so long. Aye, and that's another thing, said Garner. What are we going to do between now and Friday? It's not but half a day's tramp to Shuttingslow from here. Hush, said Fenodri. There are keen ears listening. The where and the when are all they do not know of our plans. If we can shake off these bloodhounds and lie hidden until nearer the time, we may reach the hill. Trees and running water will shield us best, and for a start we must try to lose the Morthbrood spies in the wood that fringes Radnor Mere. We shall keep to this lane until we come opposite the middle of the wood. There we shall enter, and with luck, come out at the far side alone. But we shall need more than luck to remain alone, said Jorathor, for I fear that little escapes those eyes. Above their heads wheeled a cloud of ragged-winged birds. Out over the plain other flocks were sweeping in what, from the height of the riddings, could be seen to form a very definite pattern, an interwoven net of such efficiency that any one section of the ground of, say, a mile square was rarely left uncovered by any one flock for more than a minute at a time. And they flew in silence, the only living things in all the sky. The hikers continued to pore over the map and to admire the view. Fenodri led the way back to the crossroads, where the old Macclesfield Road, Hoker Lane, ran left to Highmost Redmanhay and right to Nether Alderley. To Alderley they turned and walked beneath the round shoulder of Clinton Hill. Below, across the fields, was Radnor Wood. I'll tell you what, said Garner. Tom Henshaw seems to be as mithered with these birds as much as we are. He's gotten enough scarecrows any road. Aye, said Jorathor. And can you tell me, Farmer Mossock, what need he may have of them on pasture land? It was as Jorathor said. Every field within sight held a tattered figure with outstretched arms, even those under grass, and with cows in them.
Now, I wonder what's up with old Tom. He did say as how he's been having queer turns off and on since before Christmas. Well, this is no time to linger, said Finodry. You will embarrass our companions. They looked round and saw that the two hikers who had been leaning over John Carter's gate were now walking casually along some distance behind, to all appearances engaged in nothing more sinister than knocking off the tops of dead fool's parsley with their sticks. A flock of 13 birds closed in and began to glide in circles overhead. Are they scarecrows? Asked Colin as they continued down the lane. Mostly, said Finodry, but eyes for the Morth brood, every one. The road gradually converged on Radnor Wood until the two were running together, with only a low stone wall between them, and at a bend in the road Finodry said, When the Morth do us round this corner, we must be hidden. Now, over the wall. Brambles were waiting for them on the other side, but they tore themselves free, and ran as best as they could through the scrub and undergrowth of the matted fringe of the wood after Finodry, who was dodging nimbly over the rough ground and heading for the thickest patch of timber in sight. At once the birds began to raise a great rumpus, but Jurathor, bringing up the rear as usual, saw nothing of the hikers before the trees closed around him. As soon as they were in the shade of the beeches, the prickly undergrowth thinned out, and they made good speed, zigzagging through the lessening gaps between the trees and the masses of rhododendron. For a short time the birds screamed overhead, and then they dropped through the branches and circled in and out among the trees, calling assuredly, deliberately, as though relaying information. Finodry relaxed the pace to a quick walk. There is no need to hurry, he said resignedly. I hoped to find cover while they pondered. This wood did not favour the Morth brood in the elder days, and I thought the memory of it would hold them long enough for... His words were drowned by an outbreak of screeching above their heads. Instinctively they drew together, back to back, and the dwarfs' hands flew to their swords. All round them birds were crashing heavily to earth. For 10 seconds it might have been raining crows. Then the woods were still. Garther bent to pick up a tumbled mass of black feathers that had landed at his feet, but Jurathor stopped him. Do not touch it, he said. They are evil even in death. He turned the bird over with the point of his sword. Embedded under the heart was a small, white-feathered arrow, and at the sight of it all colour fled from Jurathor's cheeks. The Leos Alpha, he whispered. The Leos Alpha. Trembling, he put away his sword and looked to the sky. Endil! Atlendor! It is I, Jurathor! This is well met! Peace, said Finodry. They are not here. Are they not? Cried Jurathor. Ho, I tell you, cousin Wineskin, that our journey will be happier from this hour. If the Lias Alpha are come from exile, there is little we need fear between now and Friday's dawn. Do you not see? Atlendor, welcome! Ermid, Granos! But for all Jurathor's shouting, nothing happened. He ran hither and thither calling, but echoes and the hollow voice of the north wind in the treetops were his only reply. Thorin! Skandar! Finodry shook his head sadly. Come away. The Leos Alpha have been gone from the long wood of Radnor these 200 years. They do not return. Come, they are not here. None but the Morth brood will answer your call. Jurathor walked slowly back to join the others. But it can only be the Leos Alpha. There was complete bewilderment in his voice. Why do they not know me? Finodry crouched to examine the arrow more closely. Well, whoever fired yon can't be much of a size, said Garther. If it's 18 inches long, that's all it is. And what sort of a body could use a bow to fit it? The elves of light, said Finodry. The Leos Alpha. This is an elven shaft, yet still I do not think they are with us. It is more like to be the work of Stromkarls. Stromkarls? Cried Jurathor. Have you ever known the river folk to take up arms? It is the Leos Alpha. Hey up, what's yon? Said Garther, and pointed into the trees. Something white moved among the branches, though not even Garther could say where it first appeared. It fell gently towards them, swinging backwards and forwards with a graceful, swooping, dipping motion, and landed at Jurathor's feet. A white eagle feather. The dwarf grabbed it, and flourished it under his cousin's nose. See! A token! And from an elven cloak! What say you now? Finodry looked hard at the feather, and then at Jorathor. "It is the Leos Alfar," he said. Finodri urged them on with all speed after the delay. No other sign from the elves, if they were elves, was forthcoming, and Jorathor was prevailed upon to curb his excitement and to turn his thoughts to their immediate problems. "But it is hard," he said to Colin later in the day, when they were sharing the same cloak in an effort to stay alive. "It is hard to lose the companionship of elves, and if one has been dearer to you than your own kin, a more than brother right from earliest memory, the loss is nigh unbearable. When Atlendor took his people northwards, I thought to renounce my heritage and go with him, but he would not have me come. 'You have a duty to discharge,' he said, 'one of great weight. The eyes of the Leos Alfar see not only the present. By Goldenstone we said our farewells, and he gave to me Valham, and I parted with Tarnhelm, the greatest treasure of the Huldra folk.'" Jorathor smiled ruefully. "I exchanged the power of going unseen for the power of flight, and Gondemar, my father, cast me out in his anger. So have I wandered all these years, barred from my people and from the elves. Had not Cadolin pitied me and opened to me the gates of Fundindelv, mine would have been a desolate lot." But all this came much later in the day, and for the present the children and Garther were left to make what sense they could of the dead birds and Jorathor's ravings. Not that there was time for thought. They were forcing their way down an almost extinct track of frozen, rutted leaf mould, between rhododendrons of such size that the branches met over their heads, as well as across their path, when Finodri held up his hand. They stopped, listened. "Footsteps! Into the bushes!" They forced their way through the glossy hide of leaves into tangled, bare branches that comprised the main bulk of the growth. "Stay wherever you are, and do not move," whispered Jorathor fiercely. "He is close." It was difficult to see through the bushes in the dappled light. They heard someone approach, but caught only a glimpse of dark clothing. Whoever it was, he was breathing heavily. Then, as he came level with where they were hiding, he stopped. Colin, Susan and Garther prayed that the beating of their hearts was not as loud as it sounded. Jorathor and Finodri exchanged glances. "Phew, be hanged to old place," muttered a deep voice, and the owner of it sat himself down on the trunk of a fallen beech that lay across the path, and in that position his face could be seen. It was Mr. Hodgkins, a local businessman. Every morning during the week between the hours of 8 and 9 he was to be found, with dozens like him, on the platform of Alderley Edge Station, carrying his briefcase and tightly folded newspaper and tightly rolled umbrella. But now, in place of the stiff white collar and formal city clothes, James Henry Hodgkins' frame was clad in thick ski trousers and a hooded anorak, above which protruded the neck of a sweater. A beret hid his thinning hair, round his lean neck were snow goggles, leather gauntlets hung by tapes from his wrist, nailed boots encumbered his feet, and down his lined, sallow businessman's face ran rivulets. He put his back against the roots of the tree, took out his handkerchief and began to mop. 5 pairs of eyes watched him in agony. Neither the children, Garther, nor the dwarves had had time to make themselves comfortable among the branches, even if that were possible, but were standing frozen in the most awkward attitudes, cramped, precariously balanced. Any movement would have set the leaves dancing at the end of their snake-like branches. It was as though they were dangling in a snarl of burglar alarms. However, James Henry was not one to waste time unduly, and as soon as he was restored to a more even temperature, he pulled himself up and went on his way, cursing the unwieldy rucksack that chafed his shoulders and was always becoming entangled with the bushes. "Well," said Garther, "old Hodgkins, 10 years he's been a customer of mine. It just shows you can never tell." "I didn't breathe once the whole time," said Susan. "I couldn't," said Colin. "There was a branch twisting my collar, and it nearly strangled me. It's not much better now. Is it safe to move yet, Finodri?" "Aye, if we can," said the dwarf. He was wrestling to free his leg, which was hooked round the knee by a thick branch. But the branch swung higher at every jerk, and Finodri was being tipped gradually backwards off his feet. He looked so ridiculous, his knee level with his ear, that the others would have been tempted to laugh at his plight had they not found themselves in difficulties as soon as they tried to move.
These were old bushes, and behind the green outer cover lay the growth and litter of 100 years, tough, crooked boughs, inches across, stemming to long, pliant wire-like shoots, skeins of dead branches which snapped at a touch, forming lancets of wood to goad and score the flesh, and everywhere the fine, black bark dust with the bitter taste that burnt throat and nostrils and was like fine sand in the eyes. "It's as bad as walking on an old spring mattress," puffed Susan. "It's worse," said Colin. They had to step onto the thicker branches to clear the snare at ground level, and once off the ground they were helpless. The bushes dictated the direction in which they could move, and movement was not easy. Branches would give beneath their feet and spring back awkwardly, catching limbs and making even Garner, for all his weight, lurch drunkenly, and grab in desperation the nearest support, which was invariably a change for the worse. And always they seemed to be forced to climb, with the result that they were soon 2 or 3 feet from the ground. Sense of direction left them, they just took the line of least resistance. But they noticed with growing concern that the earth, or what they could see of it, was becoming less like earth and more like water. Ice-covered puddles were frequent, very frequent. Broader, deeper, they joined each other, and then there was water tinkling the pendants of ice at the bush roots, and no earth at all. Ahead, the curtain was not so dense, and Fenodri, with renewed enthusiasm, plunged, bounced and rolled, and squirmed, and his head broke free of the chaos. Before, on either side, beneath, lay Radnor. The rhododendrons spread for many yards out over the mere, their roots gripping deep in the mud, and at the point where they stretched farthest into the water, 5 faces bobbed among the leaves like exotic flowering buds. "Happen I'm nesh," said Garner, "but I dunna fancy a dip today. I'm fair sick of this here cakewalk. So what do we do, Meister?" "Nay, do not ask me, my friend. I am past thought," said Jorathor. "We must go back," said Fenodri. "Cousin, we may have space to draw our swords here. If we can do that, we shall cut an easier road to the path." Dernwyn and Widowmaker, after much effort, were drawn from their scabbards, and by leaning backwards over the water, the dwarfs gained room for the first, most difficult strokes. After that, in comparison with what had gone before, the progress was much easier. The dead growth and the leaf-bearing tentacles fell to the keen temper of the swords, which left only the thicker limbs to be negotiated, and they were not the obstacles they had been when the all-smothering lesser branches were there to aid them. The real danger, and it was a risk that had to be taken, was that the dwarfs were carving a track that could not fail to be visible from the air. "Now we must run," said Fenodri, as, hot, weary, smarting from 100 pricks and scratches, they tumbled onto the path, "for the Morth brood know where we are." And only when they had put much dense woodland behind them did Fenodri allow them a few minutes for rest. "Are we making for anywhere in particular?" asked Colin. "Not for the moment," said Fenodri. "I have a place in mind that may be the saving of us, if we can reach it. But I shall not speak of that while there is danger of hidden ears." "Cousin," said Jorathor, "do you hear?" They fell silent, tensely listening. "Aye, it is an axe." They could all hear it now, the clear, rhythmical ring of steel in timber. Garner relaxed. "I know who yon is," he said. "It'll be Harry Wardle from the Park House. He's all right. I've known him since we were lads. If there's anybody on this end of the wood today, it's as like as not he'll have seen him. Let's ask him." Said Jorathor. "I would rather not meet with men at this time. Trust no one. But Harry and I were at school together. He's a good lad." "He may be all you think," said Fenodri. "If he is, he may be able to help us. Speak with him. Jorathor and I shall watch. If he is of the Morth brood, he will not raise the alarm." They halted at the edge of the clearing. A lean, bony, middle-aged man with close-cropped, iron-grey hair was standing with his back to them and wielding a long-handled felling axe. "I'll do, Harry," said Garner. Harry Wardle turned and smiled. "Hello, Garner. What's brought thee down here?" "Oh, I'm just out for the day with young Colin and Susan here." You farmers. I wish I could take the time off when I wanted. How is the farm these days?" "Middling, for the time of the year, you knows. Could be worse." "And Bess?" "She's champion, thanks. Busy morning, Harry?" "Fair. Couple more trees to drop after this before dinner." but I'll be having bagging after this one's down. Care for some?" He nodded towards the flask and sandwiches that were lying on a tree stump. "No, thanks, Harry, all the same, but we mun be getting on." "Just as you please. Going far?" "I dunno know. As far as we've a mind to, I expect. Mony folks about today, Harry?" "Not a soul till you came along." "Well, if anybody does show up, you hanna seen us, reet?" A slow grin spread over Harry Wardle's face. "I've never clapped eyes on thee, Garther. What's up? Are you fancying a cock pheasant or two? Because if you are, take a look around Painter's Eye, but dunna say there's anybody as I told thee." Garther winked slyly. "Be good, Harry." "Be good, lad." They waved and left him, and a moment later the sound of his axe rang out behind them through the trees. "Well," said Garther, "what did I say?" "He is no warlock," said Finodry, "but there is that about him I do not trust. It would have been wiser to pass him by." "Hush," said Jorathor. "Listen." "I can't hear anything," said Colin. "Nor me," said Garther. "But you should hear something," cried Finodry. "Why has your friend's axe been stilled?" "Eh, what?" said Garther, suddenly flustered. "Here, hold on a minute." But Jorathor and Finodry were speeding back towards the clearing, drawing their swords as they ran. The clearing was empty. Harry Wardle, axe, flask and food were gone. "But," stammered Garther, his face purple, "but it's not... No, not Harry. No. He'll have nipped back to the park house for something, that's what." "If that were so," said Finodry, "he would have come up with us, for we were heading for the park house, were we not?" "Aye, I suppose we were." Garther looked stunned. Jorathor, who had taken the path on the other side of the clearing, returned, shaking his head. "As you say, Farmer Mossick," said Finodry, "you can never tell."